In late 2025, the global rare earth industry underwent a fundamental paradigm shift. Now, this wasn't driven by typical market supply and demand. Instead, it was the direct result of decisive policy actions from China that have completely reshaped the strategic landscape for these critical materials. So today, we're going to analyze this new reality. We'll begin with the core conclusions. The new reality on the ground. First, China's strategy has evolved. It's moved beyond simple resource control to asserting influence over the entire high-tech value chain. Second, this has created a brand new, policy-driven price environment with a much higher cost baseline. Third, as a result, the industry is splitting into a dual-track market, one operating inside China and one outside. And finally, the next wave of demand growth looks to be coming from very high-value applications like robotics and the emerging low-altitude economy. So here's how we'll break this down. We'll deconstruct China's new rules, examine the market's reaction, define this new dual-track structure, explore where future demand is coming from, and then we'll wrap up with a new strategic framework for analysis. Okay, so to begin, we really have to understand the strategic value of these elements. They're often called industrial vitamins for a very good reason. The industry is really split into two main categories. You've got light rare earths, or LREEs, like praseodymium and neodymium. They're more abundant and form the foundation for mass market uses like electric vehicle motors. Then you have the heavy rare earths, HREEs, like dysprosium and terbium. These are much scarcer, and they're used as critical additives that really push performance to the limit, defining the industry's technological frontier. China's unique north light, south heavy resource distribution gives it a complete supply chain that's just unmatched by any other nation. Now, let's get to the catalyst for this whole paradigm shift. China's comprehensive new export controls that were announced back in October of 2025. These new rules really represent a strategic evolution. First, they assert what's called extraterritorial control, reaching downstream products made outside of China. Second, they control the export of technology itself, including the full means of production. And finally, they implement very precise end-use restrictions, specifically targeting military and advanced semiconductor applications. This number is absolutely crucial. The de minimis rule, as it's known, says that any foreign product containing at least 0.1% of its value from specific Chinese-sourced rare earth materials now requires a Chinese export license. That threshold is incredibly low, and it effectively creates a global compliance network, forcing companies all over the world to audit their supply chains and essentially operate under Beijing's administrative authority. So the strategic implication here is a massive shift from controlling physical resources to establishing administrative dominance over the entire value chain. This approach serves a dual purpose. On one hand, it allows for precision targeting of specific end users in defense and tech, while on the other, it dramatically increases the cost and complexity for any other nation trying to build an independent supply chain. All right, let's move to the market's immediate reaction. We need to see how this policy shift actually hit prices and profits on the ground. The market received an absolutely unambiguous signal from the industry giant, Northern Rare Earth. In direct response to the new regulations, it raised its fourth quarter concentrate price by a staggering 37.13%. This wasn't just a price hike, it was a strategic move that established a new and significantly higher cost baseline for the entire global industry. The market's response was actually quite differentiated. For light rare earths, like praseodymium, neodymium, prices were volatile. You had policy support pushing prices up against downstream resistance to those higher costs, but it ultimately set a higher price floor. In contrast, the strategically critical heavy rare earths, dysprosium and terbium, remained firm and stable. This reflects a really strong seller conviction in their long-term strategic value. This new cost structure is creating a pretty significant profit squeeze, especially for firms that aren't vertically integrated. They're facing what you could call a double squeeze: higher input costs coming from their upstream suppliers, and at the same time, intense price resistance from their own customers downstream. This dynamic is a powerful force for consolidation, and it really highlights the challenges for players outside an integrated system. And this pressure is a key factor contributing to the emergence of a bifurcated, or what we're calling a dual-track market. This has really led to two distinct models taking shape. The China model is all about state-backed vertical integration, leveraging massive resource control and scale. Outside of China, we're seeing a geopolitical option model, where a company's value comes from its ability to de-risk non-Chinese supply chains. Because of that, it commands a sort of geopolitical premium. A quick comparison of key players really illustrates this divergence. For northern rare earth, its strategic advantage is absolute resource control. For a company like Jinli Permanent Magnet, the advantage is technology-driven, rooted in high-performance magnets. And then you have a company like MP Materials, whose primary advantage is its non-China status, which is backed by strong U.S. government support, although it does face significant scale and execution challenges. All right, let's turn to the demand side of the equation now, analyzing both the established base and what we see as the next major engines of growth. So, the foundation of rare earth demand is incredibly strong. In September 2025, the retail penetration rate of new energy vehicles in China hit 57.8%. This signifies a massive, stable, and truly structural demand base for the high-performance magnets that power these vehicles. And when we look at the consumption structure by value, the dominance of permanent magnets is just overwhelming. They account for roughly 65% of the total value, which makes them the undisputed primary driver for the entire industry. And looking forward, this concentration is only set to increase. Forecasts show permanent magnets are not only the largest segment, but also the fastest growing, with a projected compound annual growth rate somewhere in the range of 15 to 20% through 2030. But beyond these established markets, new, very high-value drivers are emerging. This includes industrial and humanoid robots, which need incredibly compact, powerful motors. It also includes China's strategic push into the low-altitude economy, a whole new sector that includes advanced drones and electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. The key thing here is that these applications demand even higher performance materials, signaling a market shift from just volume growth to real value enhancement. So, to synthesize all these developments, we can apply a new strategic framework. It consists of 4 distinct analytical lenses for navigating this new world. First, you have to analyze the state-backed value chain, focusing on those firms with direct resource control. Second, identify companies with a deep technology moat that gives them pricing power. Third, view the non-Chinese producers as geopolitical call options, essentially strategic assets against supply chain disruption. And fourth, you have to assess the growing importance of the circular economy through resource recycling. Now, this new era is, of course, defined by significant risks. Geopolitical risk is paramount, with the potential for escalating trade actions. For any non-Chinese player, execution risk is just immense. Then there's demand destruction risk. If prices stay persistently high, it could accelerate the search for substitutes. And finally, there is always the risk of a strategic policy reversal from China itself. And this brings us to the central question for the entire high-tech sector. In this new era of strategic competition, an era that's really being defined by China's assertive industrial policy, the global technology supply chain faces a truly unavoidable reconfiguration. How it will ultimately adapt around these critical materials, well, that remains a defining challenge for the years ahead.